Hello, horse lovers. I've been talking a lot about race horses with my sister Rue lately, and there's no denying these are some incredible horses. The speeds they can run at, the athletic feats they accomplish are amazing. And one of the greatest of all time, and it's constantly debated whether Secretariat was greater than Man o' War. I mean, that's a whole discussion right there of which horse would it beat who. But there's no denying Secretariat is at the top of the list of greatest racehorses ever. And all you had to do is look at his 31 length win in the Belmont to know how special he was. That's unheard of. Now, there's no denying he was a great horse, but there's a lot of great thoroughbreds that never even get to see the racetrack. Sometimes it's a question of what the horse wants in life. Some horses just don't care to race. But sometimes it's a question of the people behind them. And Secretariat had an amazing group of people behind him. And one of the greatest was his groom, Eddie Sweat. And this being Black History Month, that seemed like the right time to talk about him. Now, you might be saying he was a groom. What's the big deal? All he did was brush the horse. No, there's so much more to being a groom than that. I was thinking lately of a segment from Marguerite Henry's album of horses, and she talks in here about how important a groom is to a racehorse. She talks about how everyone, human or animal, needs a friend, and she talks about what a friend a groom is to a racehorse here. She says, "This friend is not always the trainer or owner. Sometimes it is the man who rubs, feeds, and waters him, his groom. How that groom tries to get his thoughts through to the owner and trainer. Persistently he corners them, and so dead earnest is his talk that the men laugh at the big sounding words, and then walk off pondering the seeds in them. So the colt gets another chance and another. Suddenly he wants to run, and he does, and he wins. And there at his side, ready with a soft warm blanket, ready with words of praise, ready with rub cloths, stands his groom, feeling big in the chest and good." So you can see a groom is a major part of a horse's life. And Eddie was the person Secretariat loved most. Now, when he was born on August 29, 1939, it was doubtful that an African American man would stand much of a chance.
He'd be one of 9 siblings to sharecropper parents, and with the height of Jim Crow, to say there was no opportunity for Eddie is an understatement. When Eddie was not working the fields with his parents, he would find himself at the local training track. And where it would all begin for Eddie is right here, at what was formerly known as the Branch Dell Racetrack, today known as the Holly Hill Training Track. Eddie, as a teenager, with a lot of other neighborhood kids, would peer through the fences watching the horses work, up until one day when Lucian Lauren would find him and offer him a job.
Lucian Lauren would, of course, go on to train Secretariat, but he saw something special in Eddie right from the start. And the first horse that they worked with together that would achieve success was a filly named Quill. Now, she's not probably a horse that most people today have heard of, but at the time, she was a pretty big deal.
Quill, a 2-year-old filly trained by Lucian Lauren and cared for by Eddie Sweat, would win the Gardenia Stakes and the Matron Stakes, and be the American champion 2-year-old filly in 1958.
Anyone who's ever spent any significant amount of time grooming horses knows that's when you get to know them. That's when, if you groom them often enough, you know the general shape of their bodies. Where you know, is their leg swollen? Do they have a bump here that they didn't before that maybe is an infected fly bite or some kind of wound that needs seeing to? Are they acting normal while they're being tied up in the cross ties to be groomed? I remember one horse that I knew. He was the only horse I've ever known to hate being groomed. Most horses loved it. and he would always dance around in the cross ties. And if he ever held still and let you just groom him, even if he looked fine otherwise, you knew you called the vet now because there's something the matter with him. So the point is, that's the time when you get to really know the horse, even more so than when you're riding. And there is so much involved in keeping the horse healthy that's part of grooming. You stimulate their circulation, you check out their feet. Oh, if they got a stone in there that needs scooping out before their work that might cause them pain. Something like that, something seemingly insignificant like a stone in the shoe, that can cause a major injury. Horses can get hurt so easily. It doesn't seem like it given how big and strong they are, but it's true. So it's the groom who is a major part of keeping them healthy as well as getting to know what they're like. Now, I mentioned before how a groom will try to pass on ideas to the owners and trainers. And Eddie took meticulous notes, and he would always, always, always pass on what he was observing to everyone else connected to the horses he was taking care of so that they knew maybe this horse needs something a little different today, or yep, this horse is good to go. But he was the person who kept them informed of that.
Eddie was proving himself to be a more than capable groom. He would meticulously make notes about everything he saw going on with the horse and pass that information on to exercise riders and Lucian Lauren alike. Eddie also had a habit of jotting down anything you told him as far as directions went, so he could be sure that he would never forget.
Of course, when people saw the horse races, they look at the trainer, they look at the owner, but two horses that Eddie cared for, of course, one being Secretariat and the other being Riva Ridge, who had the same owners as Secretariat, when they started to become famous, people started to take notice of Eddie. And that's when people started to write about him in magazines, pay attention to him, especially those who really worked with the horses.
The connections around River Ridge and Secretariat would receive massive national and international attention, but it was Eddie who would become something like a folk hero to those on the backside of the track. Eddie would be featured in Sports Illustrated, Ebony, and Jet magazines, and for good reason. Not only was he the groom of one of the most famous horses of all time, but if you asked Ron Turcotte, Hall of Fame jockey and jockey for Secretariat, and Lucian Lauren, trainer for Secretariat, and Eddie's employer, they would both tell you that they had never seen a groom more in touch with horses.
Of course, Riva Ridge and Secretariat both eventually retired from racing, but Eddie always kept involved with horses. And even in the 80s, he was still involved with champion horses.
In 1984, once again, Eddie would receive considerable national attention with Chief's Crown, a colt that would win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and voted the Eclipse Award for American 2-year-old colt. In 1985, Chief's Crown would be the betting favorite for all three of the Triple Crown races.
Eddie worked with horses as long as he could, but in the middle of the 90s he became ill and was diagnosed with leukemia, passing away in 1998. This was a guy who never asked for more than to be involved with horses. He said at one time that when he died, they'd bury him with a pitchfork in his hand and a rub rag in his pocket. And he knew horses so well that he could easily have been a trainer. But that's not what he wanted out of life. He realized that a groom was the person who was most connected to the horses. He said once that, a trainer and owner, they maybe see the horse once a day, and that's kind of pushing it at that. But being a groom, you practically live with the horse. You're always in their life. And he wouldn't have traded that for anything.
I was working with Mr. Lawrence for 18 years, and every good horse he finally run up on, he always switch it to me. So I love the job, and I love to be around horses. If every horse I rub coming like Secretariat, I don't think I want to be a trainer. Just want to be a groom.
A horse doesn't care what your parents did for a living, if they were sharecroppers or if they were millionaires. A horse doesn't care what the color of your skin is. A horse cares, do you take care of me? Do you know the itchy spots when you groom me? Do you make sure I have food and water? Do you make sure I'm well treated? Those are the things a horse cares about. And the horses that Eddie took care of adored him. He was the center of their world. Not the owner, not the trainer, not the jockey. He was the one that they looked to take care of them in their everyday lives, and that meant the world to those horses. Eddie was a very special person, and I was glad to make this tribute video to him. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, keep horses in your lives.